Thank you so much. And a very warm welcome from me as well. This is my 6th Griff, so I can call myself a veteran, I guess. It's good to see our community growing so nicely. So I'm a partner at Think Hospitality. I work with James Haken, who's been on the stage many days now, every year as well, and Mikkel Engemann and our other partners. And I'm also a consulting editor for Supper magazine, so you can grab one on the way out. It's a beautiful magazine of people, places, and products within the hotel space. And if you want to learn what the great chef Heston Blumenthal will be doing next, there's an article in there, which links a little bit into the whole world of sustainability. So this topic of sustainability, I'm wondering whether we've heard more the word experience or sustainability over the last 2 days, so I think there will be a tie in that one. And how the industry is actually solving some of the issues that we're seeing in the world. And when we look at the power that the voice of the youth is having when it comes to the environment, I think it's quite strong. So this is the path that we're on, and there's no turning back really, and I think it's a good thing because it means that we need to solve these problems. So I would like my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off our discussion. So Barney, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Barney. I'm the CEO of a company called Karakuri. We're probably most widely known for being a robotics company, so we do robotics that deal with food preparation and food service. But I guess the reason I'm on this panel is the thing that people don't tend to understand about our business on first inspection is that to make robots work effectively in any kind of environment, you have to understand the process that's operating around them and the ins and outs. And we've really developed that into what we call an enterprise resource planning solution, an ERP solution for a kitchen, which allows us to look at how raw ingredients and processes are being conducted throughout that whole life cycle of things coming in from suppliers and ending up on a customer's plate, and how that can be optimized and made generally more efficient to reduce food waste, reduce the carbon footprint of a restaurant, and just basically try and make the whole system much more sustainable.
Thank you. Michael.
Hi, good afternoon. Michael Webb. I'm co-founder of Distrkt. We're a restaurant and leisure property consultancy based in London. Majority of our work's landlord-focused, and we'll discuss how sustainability is at the heart of that now.
Mark Zornes, one of the founders of Winnow. Winnow is a technology that helps kitchens measure and prevent food waste. We work worldwide in about 50 different countries now, with a number of major hotel brands, quick service restaurants like IKEA, contract caterers like Compass Group and ISS, and then sort of really big mega food operations like Wynn Casinos, Carnival Cruise Lines, and others. Our clients today are saving about $40 million in food costs. It's our target to grow that to $1 billion over the next 5 years. And Winnow Vision, our sort of AI technology that we launched about a year ago that we were developing for about 3 years before that, is really how we're going to ride that and help make that happen.
My name is Markus, Managing Director for the NH Hotel. It just said list, but it's NH Hotel Group. No need to introduce, I guess. You're staying in one of our top hotels, the NH Collection Grand Hotel Krasnopolski. I'm responsible for 130 hotels in Northern Europe.
Okay, great. I think we have quite a variety of different viewpoints when it comes to sustainability and how in the industry we're trying to solve some of these issues. So I'd like to first focus on the business models. So maybe, Michael, you can talk a little bit about, because you work with property, and how we're looking now at landlords and how they choose their tenants. What is it that operators need to do now in terms of the sustainable practices? It's no longer just about recycling, but it's getting very, very particular.
Yes, it's changed massively. Initially, 3 or 4 years ago, it was very much a tick box exercise. Everyone sort of said they did it, but did they really know what they're doing? Probably not. But now it's become absolutely fundamental. It's something that the brands we're seeing really want to do as well. Before, I think they were forced a little bit. The landlords sort of put a bit of pressure on them to do it, but now it's at the heart of their business models. Interestingly, landlords now, we've had a recent case where we had 2 tenants bidding on the same site, great brands, very different cuisines. There wasn't much between the pair of them, and the end result was we chose the brand that had the better sustainability system. One was sort of said, yep, we'll save a bit of plastic, we won't use straws, but they hadn't really thought about it. And the other brand, they had a consultancy, an external consultant they had employed, they had a proper strategy, they had measures in place, and they had also sort of a target where they wanted to take things over the next few years, and it was very obvious that they'd spent a lot of time and money on that, and they were the brand that we went through to take that site.
So it was a core of their business model, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. And that they see if they don't do that, they're going to get left behind by the consumer as well. You know, especially nowadays, we're seeing much younger people, especially, will make a choice, not just on great cuisine, cool fit out, how great it is on Instagram, which is still very, very important, but people will make a decision on how it's sustainable.
I think that actually I heard it at a conference I was in Frankfurt when someone on stage said that if you don't do it, your customers will. Mm-hmm. So I think it's the power of the voice of the customer. I think is
so,
driving it.
I think you will, like I say, straws is an obvious one and very topical. I think most of us probably try to not use a straw anyway at home or in the pub, wherever it may be. So that's something you can do yourself. So you need the restaurant to be elevated to something you can't do, which is like the food you're getting in a restaurant. You're more often not going to be able to eat that food at home. So you want every experience to be elevated.
And Maarten, in the hotel group, when we look at how you bring in concepts and when you bring in chefs, is this a big and an important fact when you look at what is it that they will be doing as a concept? Is sustainability a big driver in that?
Yeah, well, it's part of it. It's not the main driver. In a way, we try to deliver the experience, but it's definitely a very important aspect in that. So as to that, well, we think we have very good breakfast in the NH Collection hotels. Before, we used to make our buffets with nice plates and but large plates. And after a while, I don't know, 1 hour or something, you throw what's left in there, you just throw it away. And now we've changed that and it serves two ways. If you serve smaller portions, on the one hand, you keep it more fresh. You have to repeat and replenish more often, but you have a better guest experience. And at the same time, you have much less waste. So there, the knife cuts both ways, if you want.
And that actually brings us nicely into this whole supply chain and looking at that, what it means in our business. Barney, looking at manufacturing industry, what can we learn from that when it comes to efficiencies, when it comes to optimization, and how we can bring that into the restaurant business?
Yeah, I mean, the kind of famous story I'm always telling people is the analogy I always go between. If you look at something as complex as car manufacturing, and you look at what's happened in that since the 40s, where Henry Ford would sit there and say, well, you can have any car you like as long as it's black. And now you go into a dealership, and even if you want to buy the basic model Ford, you've got something like 35,000 variants of what that basic Fiesta or Ford car or whatever can be in terms of its color, its trim levels, everything that goes through there. And what the automotive industry has done is deploy technology to handle everything from the order interface, so the relationship you have with the salesman in the showroom who deals with the order of that car. They will tell you the exact price of that car, and they'll tell you the exact date and time it's going to be delivered. And once you place that order, it triggers a whole series of events through their supply chain and manufacturing process. That will go to the exact number of nuts and bolts that need to be ordered, when they need to be delivered to the factory so that they can be put on the car just in time, how much steel has to come in to go through the manufacturing process. There's a combination of robotics and automation used there with human labor, and ultimately the car gets delivered to you on time, on spec, and it's a far higher quality product than you would have ever conceived buying in 1940 at a much lower real world price than you would have seen at that time. When you tend to look at our industry, that level of technology hasn't really got there at all yet. And that's really where we start to come into the picture and start to cooperate with people. We are seeing a whole explosion in new EPOS systems, order taking systems, table management systems, software that goes around that. But when you look at the kitchen, I think if you were to compare a kitchen to a photograph from 1940 and a photograph from this week, and you did the same thing in one of Henry Ford's plants, you'd see an enormous difference in the car manufacturing plant. It's pretty difficult to notice a huge amount of difference in the way that a kitchen works. So we think all of that technology is going to come in. So an awful lot of just-in-time supplier management, we're reducing waste, optimizing the way things are produced, looking at things coming through a system so that you can deliver a better experience to the end customer. They get exactly what they want in the way that they want it at the time that they want it. But you fine-tune that whole process from literally from farm through to plate by gathering data all the way across that process, analyzing that data, and becoming much better at your projection modeling and understanding what the state and location of your inventory is and what it's going to take to turn that inventory into a finished product, a finished meal to go to a customer.
And that actually ties very nicely into, Marc, the product that you launched and created and have quite ambitious goals with it. So can you talk to us a little bit more about kind of the very staggering statistics that we see in the industry and what is the next step in what you will be doing with Winnow?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just some statistics about food waste, and I'm sure a lot of you are starting to sort of recognize these. About a third of all food that is grown is not eaten. If you put an economic sort of cost on that, it's about $1 trillion a year that's thrown away. We estimate that in out-of-home consumption, it's probably about $100 to $150 billion of cost to the industry every single year. And that's, you know, both our own experience and sort of otherwise. What that means for any given business is typically anywhere between, on the low end, 5 to 7% of food costs, more on average 10 to 15% of food costs, right? So we focus in on enabling chefs to minimize that. I think there is, you know, a really interesting thing. You talk about reducing waste, and you talk about actually making a better experience for the customer at the same time. And when we started working with clients, there was a fear that if you reduce food waste, you will actually hurt your offer, right? I have a luxurious offer. That is a natural inbuilt part of the process. And the reality is that's just not true, right? You can make intelligence decisions to actually get that production working better. The food's fresher. There's less waste, so therefore you have more money should you want to reinvest that back on the food offer. And where we do track it, we often see sort of F&B net promoter scores or sort of feedback go up at the same time. Where we're going is we're continuing to lead the world and sort of advance on food waste prevention, but we're moving into more and more really what I would call kind of a kitchen management system. And it's about getting the right tools to make the right production at the right time, as well as looking at sort of other areas that frankly are real challenges for sort of chefs today. And I walk into kitchens and I see so much being done by pen and paper. And I think, you know, this is about 4.0, right? Industry 4.0. I don't look at artificial intelligence as necessarily something that is going to come in and in any real time like replace jobs. And that's not the sort of aim certainly of what we're trying to do. This is about empowering chefs to do their job better and spend more time focusing on food quality and what the customer cares about, and a little bit less on how you efficiently run the factory that is the kitchen at the same time. And so that's what we're really trying to help solve.
It's really the quality over quantity kind of viewpoint. In terms when it comes to food. Let's talk a little bit about implementation, because I think it's come as a subtext in what all of you said in terms of implementing these things, and what do you see as the kind of pain points when it comes to it? Maybe, Barney, we start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we tend to find people's views on legacy, i.e. they've done it this way and therefore they're always going to do it this way, the greatest encumbrance to change. So typically in our business we find the greatest excitement and willingness and ability to change and deploy new things in some of the challenger brands. So the newer restaurant groups are coming through. I mean, we've had conversations with some of the major groups where they're like, oh, this is fantastic, we want to deploy it now. It's going to take us 2 years to be able to update our EPOS system, to be able to talk to anything that's in the kitchen. And we'll talk to a new brand and they'll be able to talk to their suppliers, do the same thing within a week. Now, clearly there's a bigger logistical problem when you're dealing with bigger groups, but that is, I think, a real problem that the industry faces, in that its deployment of technology across bigger states has been very slow and very poorly understood within the core of the business. So when you need to change to deploy other technologies which are going to help you achieve better margin and achieve better sustainable goals, that's something that's really got to be thought in, and you've really got to, you know, certainly as we talk to some of the bigger groups, the ones that are embracing that and moving forward with that are investing heavily in their future vision of how technology is going to work across their entire business.
And Marc, what about you? Obviously, it's a system that needs to be taught to the staff, and I understand now you're moving more into computer vision technology. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the reason that, when I started Winnow, we wanted to use this to be fully automated. It just wasn't technically possible at the time. Really simply around waste, the system is going to get to a place where it's just automatically identifying everything. You have accurate data on what's thrown away. And then that data is really actionable for the chef, right? That removes sort of a lot of the pain of making sure the data that you're collecting is accurate and sort of any time that sort of goes into that. But I think you also have to recognize that this is about behavior change in a kitchen, sort of no matter any way that you slice it. So, I think technology is important because what we need to achieve over the next 10 years, so many different hotel chains and contract caterers and casinos and cruise lines are setting targets to reduce food waste by 30%, by 50% by sort of 2030. That is a tremendous ask to achieve in a 10-year period of time. And fundamentally, technology needs to be the enabler to make that happen in a consistent way at scale. But if you do not bring the people along with you, you will fail as well. So you have to do both at the same time.
And I understand you're working with Maarten and his team already on some of their properties, yeah?
In fact, yes. In fact, we do. It was quite coincidentally. I run over your product. I read it somewhere. And I said, to my staff, I think it's a very interesting one. So indeed, we are testing it in 4 of our larger hotels in the Netherlands. And to see how the outcomes are, whether we scale up. As I told you before, at least 100 hotels. So to solve your challenges, your growth path. But we are testing it in this hotel, and so far it works indeed. And it's also what you were saying. It's not about losing quality, or it's what we think is very important is the awareness in the pre-preparation, if you want. That you don't need, after some time, if you throw that much away, and at the end of the day you see, hey, I've thrown away so and so much euros or dollars or whatever, and you add it up, then hopefully you change your processes in the next days after, so you produce less or you buy less. That's the learning curve we're getting at.
And Michael, going back to kind of property and implementation of these sort of practices, is there oversight? Does it actually exist now? How do people get scrutinized or operators get scrutinized on this?
I think there's 2 things to look at. There's implementation and being realistic. I think a lot of landlords will have a lease where you have the rent and the use and everything else is set and it's a legal document, and then you have a guideline. So a lot of clients will set a guideline to waste disposal, delivery, how you do this and other things, but it's very much a guideline. So therefore, if the tenant doesn't adhere to that, it's a bit of a slap on the wrist. They're in the bad books, but there's no actual issue if you traded the restaurant as a retail unit or if you didn't pay the rent. There's a legal implication to that. I think you will see that become more legal implications to the contracts and the leases. However, obviously with that, there's going to be, if you don't pay the rent, it's very easy to say you haven't paid the rent. If you're not quite doing anything sustainable, it's very hard to scrutinize the tenant precisely on that. And there's obviously a head office cost and management and that sort of thing. So we will get there. I think that's one big thing of it's very much a guideline in most things. And also being realistic. As Darren and Chris were saying earlier, businesses have to make money. We're dealing with a big project, a good example in Borough, next to Borough Market. And one of the ideas the landlord came up with was to enforce the restaurants to purchase the fruit and veg from Borough Market, which is a wonderfully romantic idea, and anyone that's been there, it's an incredible place. It is so expensive. Yeah. It is unbelievably expensive, and it's just not viable. And these operators will no doubt have wonderful sustainable farms in Hampshire and the north of England and wherever it may be, doing a perfectly good job at a much lower cost. So there's the balance of getting it right and implying not just for the sake of it, and actually working with the tenant. I think we're seeing much more partnerships as well now. It can't just be the landlord.
On the presentation before, which
Exactly.
I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, and the landlords need to learn from the tenant as well, because the landlord can't just say, we want you to do this, and the tenant say, well, that's great, and we'd love to do it, but in practice, it's going to mean this, it's going to cost us X more, we're not going to be able to pay the rent of that level, and so other things. So it's very much a learning curve for both, but I think the guidelines that become more statutory and sort of working together to become more realistic, I think is the 2 key things that we will see them evolve though.
And actually, if I could ask you also to touch a little bit on the idea of food halls, and because obviously it's a big trend right now, you know, 350 coming in Europe this year, and some staggering statistics. Is that a model that can support more of these sustainable practices when we talk about automation on the supply chain, on the food waste, or not?
I think it is. You get things like delivery is a good example. A lot of them, the food halls will now start insisting that all of the operators will use tomatoes as an example, order the same tomatoes from the same place, and they'll get together as a bit of a buying power to do that. So you have one delivery in, so deliveries is a big thing. I think it's also a sort of social sustainability way. It's creating much more communities. You know, if you look at things like in Manchester, Auction Market, that created a community off the back of a unloved, beautiful warehouse building, and then around it's popped up all these amazing independent retailers and artists and creatives. So it's actually creating a community as well. I think it's more so probably the opportunity it gives people to go into the food markets because the cost is minimal to the tenant, and they're getting an opportunity to do something they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. You know, a traditional restaurant is somewhere between 750 to £1 million to fit out. So the huge amount of money, and you're risking a 10-year lease. You know, your livelihood, but the food markets are much less than that. So it allows them to be more sustainable in the fact that there's more, you know, they're not as tied in.
And kind of as we're coming to the end of our session, looking into the future, Marc, you already set some quite big goals. And Barney, I want to start first with you. When we spoke, you said that actually what we can do, looking at the supply chain, is making sure that one small decision doesn't have this big ripple effect of making it to the bin in the end. So when do you think we'll see this sort of in how many years and in what time frame should we actually see this automation come to life and being able to solve for this inefficiency?
I think you're already seeing it now. I mean, you know, with what Marc's doing is a very good example of it, but I think you're going to see that evolve and evolve and evolve more and more. And I think within the sort of 24 to 60 month time frame, you're going to see some really seismic changes. And I think I actually think that sustainability is kind of a bit of a non sequitur to what's really going on, which really is just all about efficiency. And it's about efficiency of how we use the world's resources, be that the oil, the gas, the fuel that makes deliveries, the food that we have. I think it's all about that. And actually, I think that's completely aligned with business goals in terms of maintaining and increasing margin and delivering a better product to your customer. So I think over that period, the conversation will morph from how are we being sustainable to how are we being efficient, and how can I get more efficiency out of my business to provide a better product and provide a better return for my investors.
And Marc, obviously you work with hotel groups, you work with contract caterers, restaurants. What's the next frontier for you in terms of where would you want to solve this next and take your technology to?
So look, we want to solve as much of the problem as we possibly can. There's a lot out there. What we're doing at the moment is investing an incredible amount. I mean, you know, I think it's about 40 to 50 engineers in sort of both sort of listening to our customers, making our product better, kind of making it more applicable to sort of more sites, if you will, not just sort of the largest properties that we work with. I would expect that in the next couple of years, we're actually going to move from sort of just the hotel and sort of catering, sort of the meetings and event space and sort of breakfast, and actually go more into restaurants to be able to do that. To be able to do that, it's actually not just looking at sort of the waste that's happening in the kitchen, but actually what customers aren't eating. I'm starting to get fascinated to like understand what customers are not eating on their plates and the trends that's telling me on kind of how the kitchen's working, how efficient that is. I find that really exciting. That is an incredible technical challenge. But you know, what I'm excited about is that we have both kind of the experience, the data, and now sort of the team to actually make that a reality. So I think you should expect to continue to see us pushing the envelope. I, if anything, think that we have to go solve $1 billion a year of food waste. We've got a number of things we have to do that's beyond so much more than what we're doing today, but that's super exciting. I will say, though, that in parallel, I've been recently moved by a report that I read called The Inevitable Policy Response. And I think that there is a sort of ticking clock on this around sustainability that we have to reckon with. And if we aren't taking a leadership to solve this, then policy will start coming in to force us to solve it. And I hope we can energize to solve as much of it ourselves and be in the right place when that does come.
And Maarten, looking at hotel developments and coming up with new brands, and how, I'm pronouncing it correctly, when you think about new projects and new developments, are you taking all this into considerations? Are you looking at kitchen design, doing it differently, making sure that you're on this track and putting in maybe products that we've just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But it goes beyond that. We are all, I guess, or majority in the service industry. So to try to make it more efficient and try to automate as much as possible. But still, it is a client industry, service industry. So what we did just in the Now hotel, we are NH Now, the combination is Now. In our Now hotel in London, which we opened 1 month ago, we have an extra employee, we called him Henry, and he's a butler, and he's a robot. And he brings your room service to the room, so we've implemented that thing. We try to look at in both the technical in combination with service, in combination with a certain wow effect, and also in our Now Amsterdam Rai hotel, which we just opened 3 weeks ago, here in Amsterdam. And we also ordered several Henrys, several butlers to do the room services. So we look into that more into the robotization.
Okay, well, great, and that's already. We're a couple of seconds over. So I would like to thank my panelists very much. And, I'm hoping you'll be around for people who have questions thereafter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.